Fidelius Charm, a complex spell with a seemingly simple idea. For those of you who need a reminder, the spell is used to hide a secret inside an individual's soul, turning that person into the secret keeper. And while in theory it can be used to protect any secret, we see it most commonly used on people's homes because it makes any dwelling invisible, soundproof, intangible, and unplottable. So unless the secret keeper tells you where it is, you aren't finding it.
Not in my house.
But the thing is, for a seemingly simple spell, there are a lot of holes with it. And the first is one we're pretty used to as Harry Potter fans, but for a spell that's so useful, especially in times of war, we only know of 4 times of it being used, and that's at the Potter's Place in Godric's Hollow, number 12 Grimmauld Place, Bill and Fleur's place in Shell Cottage, and Ron's Aunt Muriel's. This is one of the easier ones to explain, though, because this spell is extremely difficult to perform, it's multifaceted, and it's also ancient, so really the explanation for that is that it's just an uncommon spell that has a very specific purpose that really isn't needed in most times, so it's just one of those spells that's been lost to time. But we all know the real reason. It's meta, of course. We just needed a spell to create another villain and somebody who betrayed the Potters and Wormtail, So it's just extremely difficult so that we don't always have it, front of mind. It's the same thing with, Polyjuice Potion or Time Turners or especially Felix Felicis. The next problem we have with this spell is involving its protection with the secret keepers. Obviously with the nature of the spell, you're not going to be telling a lot of people your secret, but at the same time, we don't know how many secret keepers you can have. Of course, we know you can have multiple secret keepers because when the original secret keeper dies, the secret lives on through everybody they told it to, so everybody who's been told the secret becomes a secret keeper. But what about when the charm is originally cast? Can the caster hide the spell in multiple souls? Can you start with multiple secret keepers? I tend to lean towards yes on this one because even though the secret keeper protects the secret, at the end of the day it is the caster's secret, and I would think they could tell as many people as they want. It would just be inadvisable to be telling multiple people about this. It would dilute the power of the Fidelius Charm, and when I think of it, and another example of soul magic would be with Horcruxes. The more pieces of your soul that you're trusting people with, the more likely that somebody's going to find out what you're doing and try to destroy all the Horcruxes. So I think it would be possible, I just think it would be inadvisable. And while I'm talking about it with secret keepers, what happens if the secret keeper doesn't tell anybody the secret and then dies, but the caster of the spell is still alive? There's still a need for the secret. As an example, if James and Lily chose James's parents as secret keepers right before they died of dragonpox, would the secret then die with them? Would anybody be able to find them, friend or foe? This one's a little more difficult to answer because, on the one hand, it is kind of similar to, mastering a wand. Harry thinks at the end of the story that if he dies having never been defeated, that the power of the Elder Wand will die with him. And at the same time, it is kind of similar with the Fidelius Charm, because the information has to be passed along willingly by the secret keeper. It doesn't matter if somebody uses Legilimency or Veritaserum, even the Imperius or Crucio curses. It's actually one of the few absolutes with this spell.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Though Master Kenobi does have a point here, and, he's kind of arguing almost for the sentience of both wands and people. Mr. Ollivander, the master of wands in the series, does think that they have a certain amount of sentience, so even if Harry does die undefeated, the Elder Wand may want to have another master someday, and admittedly, I'm a little biased here. I'd like to think that we as people have a certain amount of sentience, and that would include us casting the Fidelius Charm too. And I think the difference here is that it can really go either way on this spell. If all you want to do is survive, you can let the secret die with your secret keeper, but if you want to try to live as normal of a life as possible, you can pick a new secret keeper.
I don't want to survive! I want to live!
But I want to go back a second to the secret keeper actually divulging the secret. What counts as actually telling somebody the secret? Is it enough to just bring somebody to the location? How close can you bring them to it without it counting? Because in Order of the Phoenix, when the Order brings Harry to Grimmauld Place, Dumbledore's the secret keeper there, so he has to be the one who tells Harry about it, but the way Harry finds out about it is because Moody gives him a card that Dumbledore wrote the address on. But is this really all it takes to get in here? I mean, the Order is able to bring Harry to the street that they're supposed to, but obviously Dumbledore's the secret keeper, so he has to be the one to tell Harry, but if this card is just enough, what if Moody gave it to, like, Uncle Vernon? Would that be enough to get him in? And then when the Golden Trio escapes from the Ministry, they disapparate with Yaxley alongside them, and, it's the reason why they have to just be camping on the English countryside, but at the same time, how much risk is there really? Yaxley may know where he is, but he couldn't tell anybody anyway, so is he just gonna camp out by himself in Grimmauld Place? Or, like, obviously there's a risk and it's still going to count, but, just trying to figure out, could he bring more Ministry officials, like, just outside of Grimmauld Place? And yes, I do lean towards that he could, for the same reason that the Order could bring Harry to just outside Grimmauld Place, but not actually in there. And as for the card, it's possible that that's all you would need to do. Again, there's more risk, and it's not advisable to do so, but at the same time, a wizard as powerful as Dumbledore, I'm sure that he could somehow use a spell to make sure that only Harry can read this card. The next inconsistency with the spell I want to look at is what actually stops the spell from working, because even the jinx on Voldemort's name doesn't take it down. And yes, the Death Eaters are still just right outside on the street, but at the same time, they could just be at any location that Harry would be likely to be at. There's still the question of, like, how could they even know how to go this far, but I think that's a pretty easy answer too with Snape. He obviously becomes a secret keeper too, and here's the thing with Snape, what makes him such a great Occlumens is that he tells parts of the truth. He knows where to hold back, so he could tell the Death Eaters what street to go on, but not tell them, hey, this is the address, this is how you get in, and then, they just know that they can wait out there, but they're never able to get in, and because Snape is right, nobody knows he's lying. But back to what stops the spell from working. If we look at our 4 examples, we can rule out 2 of them pretty quickly with Shell Cottage and Muriel's Place, because the spell works how it's supposed to with both of them. Well, mostly. Bill ends up telling Harry that Arthur is the secret keeper at Muriel's Place, and Ron tells Dobby to go to Bill and Fleur's just outside of Shell Cottage, and it feels like neither of them should be able to tell it, because it's still adjacent to the secret at the very least, but I guess at the same time, neither of them really says the address or where you're going to find them specifically, so it feels like it shouldn't work, but it's in the canon there, so the most I can say is that on a technicality, you can say, hey, the Fidelius Charm is on this place, but I don't know where it is, or I'm not the secret keeper, so I couldn't tell you anyway. But enough of my tangent. Back to how the spell stops working, and I'm not really sure it ever should. When we look at Grimmauld Place, we obviously know that Dumbledore is the secret keeper, and while it's presumed that he also cast the charm, given the nature of the spell that you're telling somebody a secret, I would argue it makes more sense that it would have to be the owner of the home who actually casts the charm, so Sirius in this case.
All of that.
What, Daddy?
Now, if the spell would die when either the caster or the secret keeper would die, then it should die with one of them. But obviously I've said that when Dumbledore dies, everybody he told becomes the secret keeper, but it's Sirius's death that makes me think there might be something else here, and that's if we take a closer look at his will. After his death, Sirius leaves everything to Harry. His home, his possessions, his house elf, and its creature that lends to the fact that there is a magical transfership of ownership here, because otherwise Kreacher would be able to disobey Harry's orders. And when you look at it through that lens, then you also have to look at Dumbledore asking Harry for permission to continue to use Grimmauld Place as a base for the Order of the Phoenix. I mean, it could just be Dumbledore being polite. I mean, he is polite to a fault.
This has all been an imposition. I'm so dreadfully sorry.
Sorry, everyone.
But at the same time, this could be how Dumbledore keeps the Fidelius Charm going. He's still the secret keeper here, so Harry really only knows because of him, but at the same time, when you consider Sirius's will here, when would he have made it? He had been on the run for the last 3 years. He had been in Azkaban for 12 before that, so I can't imagine him making this will before he was at Grimmauld Place again, and the Ministry wouldn't be enforcing any of the magical ownership here, so it must be Dumbledore who's actually transferring the ownership of all of Sirius's possessions. But even if I'm wrong here and the Fidelius Charm is only up because the Secret Keeper is still alive or the secret lives on through whoever they told, it's still not consistent with the Potter's Place in Godric's Hollow. Now, the explanation we're given is that the Fidelius Charm died there with James and Lily that night, and even Harry thinks so in Deathly Hallows, but here's the thing about that. Even in Deathly Hallows, when Harry and Hermione are there for Christmas, Peter Pettigrew is still alive. But let's take a step back here a bit too, because I think we can answer some other inconsistencies with the spell as we look a little closer at the Potter's Place. Peter is chosen as the Secret Keeper as a bluff on Sirius's idea here, as the Potters are going into hiding, but here's the thing, if they're bluffing this, then people have to know that they're going into hiding, which, given that Fudge is willing and able to tell a bartender this, then yeah, it's fair to say that people know. Now, Dumbledore is obviously in charge of the Order of the Phoenix at this time, and therefore is in charge of the protections of both the Potters and also the Longbottoms after the prophecy is made, and it's pretty easy to say that he's going to be doing all he can to protect both families. And because Dumbledore knows how important this is, I think it's easy to say that he would volunteer to be either family's secret keeper, but I can't see him being reckless enough to do it for both families, and because he's a pretty obvious target, I think it would almost be safer to pick somebody else. So because of that, I'd argue that he knows neither location for either family, and as for the Longbottoms, I think that they would pick Neville's grandmother to be the secret keeper, and then she would report to Dumbledore on how they're doing, and my evidence of that being that she kind of seems to know quite a lot for somebody who was never a member of the Order of the Phoenix. My grand's always said you know who would come back one day. She says if Dumbledore says he's back, he's back. It doesn't sound like much, but the only other characters who seem to know that Voldemort is going to come back are Dumbledore and Hagrid, aside from his followers who believe in him, and Trelawney who doesn't even know that she's saying that he'll be back. And the evidence that Dumbledore never knew where the Potters were hiding is that Hagrid is the one who brings a baby Harry to Privet Drive. I mean, yes, he trusts him with his life, but at the same time, just logistically, Dumbledore has a lot of ways that he can travel a lot quicker than Hagrid can, and he doesn't even plan for him to be using Sirius's bike that night. So I think it's fair to say that James or Lily cast the spell and had their initial secret keeper be Sirius, who would then tell Hagrid, because Hagrid believes that Sirius was the secret keeper and that he betrayed the Potters. And then, after Hagrid knows, they then decide, hey, let's bluff here, let's have it be Peter. So, once he knows, all three parties then agree to change the secret keeper from Sirius to Peter. And yes, we don't know for a fact that you can change secret keepers, but this is really the only way that it makes sense that people believe that Sirius was the Potter's secret keeper, because Hagrid is able to get there. He knows the secret, and if Peter told him, then he would think that it was Peter who betrayed the Potters, but he believes it was Sirius, so James, Lily, and Sirius must have come up with this plan and all agreed to then hide the secret in Peter after the fact. Now, obviously this plan doesn't work, as Peter immediately tells Voldemort where the Potters are, and he goes to their house, he kills them, tries to kill Harry, but the curse backfires, and leaves Harry scarred, Voldemort less than the meanest ghost, and James and Lily are dead, as Harry believes that the spell dies here at this moment. But if the Fidelius Charm died here, then why are Hagrid and Sirius able to be here by themselves, really. You know, where's anybody in the town? Did nobody from Godric's Hollow see this house and be like, huh, where did this come from? And didn't try to knock on the door, especially when they see that the house looks like it was almost destroyed? And if somebody at the very least reported this to the Ministry of Magic, somebody would be checking on this. And, are they really going to just leave a baby there? Especially when you see at least one of his parents are dead, and most likely you're seeing two dead bodies in this house. Who's going to leave a baby there after that? So between Hagrid and Sirius being there being no ministry officials there, and the fact that Peter Pettigrew is still alive, and I think it looks like the Fidelius Charm is still up on this house. But then we get to Christmas time and Deathly Hallows, and Harry and Hermione are there as Nagini follows them in front of the cottage, and looks like we have possibly 3 more people who could see the house. Harry is easy enough to explain, and we are seeing it from his point of view too, but, he was obviously brought there as a baby by his parents. He lived in the house for a while, so he'd be able to get through the Fidelius Charm no problem. And as far as Nagini goes, it's possible that she's just stopping and approaching them because she knows the monument is there, or recognizes that Harry and Hermione are stopping here again and just wants to approach them here. But it is also possible that she is seeing the house, and there is an explanation for it, because the Fidelius Charm hides the secret specifically in a soul, and she is one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, so a piece of his soul lives inside of her, and it's almost kind of like a funny little workaround where, because Voldemort isn't the secret keeper, he can't tell her, but because it's in his soul also, by splitting it and giving her a piece of it, she can also know the location. Just, funny little workaround there in what is just terrible dark magic. But if you don't want to go with that, Peter's still alive, so Voldemort could just have Wormtail tell her the secret also. And as far as Hermione goes, we don't know for sure if she sees the house. She could just be reacting to Harry seeing the house, but not actually seeing it herself. Harry's been very singularly focused on his family on this trip, so if he's reacting, she must kind of be like realizing, oh, this is something else with his family, and then they see the monument. I might have another idea for this one, but I'm going to save that one for its own video, so subscribe if you don't want to miss that one. And since I brought up the monument, let's really dive into it with that one too. It says that the house was left in ruin and it's invisible to muggles, so the Ministry must have some idea of it, so how do I explain that one? Well, at this point, Sirius is in Azkaban, Voldemort is nearly dead, and Wormtail is on the run, so that leaves Hagrid as the only one who'd be able to tell the Ministry anything similar to this, And like our technicality before with Bill, I think he would be able to tell the Ministry that Sirius was the secret keeper here, and that the Fidelius Charm was being used, and just like earlier with the Order of the Phoenix bringing Harry outside of Grimmauld Place, I think he would be able to bring people to the street that they lived on, just outside the house, but not actually be able to bring them into the house because he's not the secret keeper. And Hagrid would still be able to tell them that the house was in ruin, and, at that point, who's going to fix it? Hagrid can't be caught doing magic, and Peter isn't around to tell anybody new about it, so nobody's going to be able to go in there and try to fix the house. And then you consider, well, why doesn't somebody go ask Sirius about it? But the Ministry is content just chucking him in Azkaban without a trial, as he's stuck in there for 13 years.
12 years!
Yeesh. Okay, sorry, Sirius. 12 years. And as for the invisible to muggles part, are we so sure that the Ministry just doesn't want to look as incompetent and clueless as we know they are? That they aren't just counting on purebloods lying for them so that they can feel superior, while muggleborns fear that they'll stick out if they say they can't see it, Or that if Dumbledore was involved somehow and heard this, that he wouldn't just let the Ministry make fools of themselves?
Dumbledore's got style.
And I didn't touch on it very much in the video because there's not a lot of examples of it, but the Fidelius Charm, in theory, could really be used on any secret. There's the idea that Snape could have cast the Fidelius Charm on his love for Lily, that was his secret, and Dumbledore was the secret keeper, we don't know this for a fact, but it is a nice explanation for why Sirius and Lupin never seem to be able to remember that Snape and Lily were friends at any point. And again, it would kind of go into with what I was saying earlier, where you could change your secret keeper after the fact, where, you know, Dumbledore dies and Snape could let the secret die with him, but it is necessary that Harry learns as much as possible to be able to defeat Voldemort. But at the same time, Snape doesn't want everybody knowing that he loved Lily, so he would just be telling Harry as he dies, and that's how his secret lives on, and how Harry is able to talk so glowingly about Snape. Who knows how many people he's telling that he loved his mother, but, you at least would think that he's telling Ron, Hermione, and Ginny that. At the end of the day, if I had to summarize the Fidelius Charm, I'd say that it's a powerful spell with limited abilities that's really just lost to time, and I think any inconsistencies with it can be explained just by taking a step back, looking at character motivations, looking at other situations where it's used, and instead of looking at something as a problem, usually we can just come up with a new rule for it, or there's another explanation. That's why we like watching videos like these, to try to find those explanations. There are no plot holes, they're just theories. Obviously I didn't come up with that. That's the Super Carlin brothers, but, it works. And I think the rules for the Fidelius Charm are that if you're the secret keeper, you can tell somebody the secret or you can show it to them. And once you know the secret, you can kind of give like a general idea. You can confirm that it's there and take them even to the street it's on, but you can't tell that final step, obviously. And then when you do look at it too, the Fidelius Charm can never really die, unless it's just kind of forgotten to time, and then at the end of the day, is there really a difference there? And, you can also bluff your secret keeper as well, so you can change who it is at any time as long as all parties agree. And if your secret keeper does die, you can choose to have another secret keeper. It's the difference of, do you want to survive or do you want to live, But at the end of the day, that's your choice, There are more options with this than I think most people will give it credit for, and now I want to shift the question to you guys. What do you guys think of this analysis of the Fidelius Charm? Is there anything you'd like to add here? But that's all I got for you guys today, so if you enjoyed, please drop a like, subscribe if you want more like this, and I'll see you next time on STV.